Hey, help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also hit that like button to subscribe if you want more Cavs-focused content. Last week, I spent a lot of time considering why people would want to draft a quarterback. And I understand why people want to draft a quarterback. Like I said in my videos last week, hell, I want the Browns to draft a quarterback, but I don't want them to just draft any quarterback. And I don't want them to reach for a quarterback. And in this year's draft, taking a quarterback at 2 will at the very least be a reach, quite possibly a colossal reach. So for those reasons, I'm not really excited about the idea of drafting a quarterback at 2. Another thing that makes me not excited about the idea of taking a quarterback at 2 is that the top of this draft has generational talents or generational level prospects, right? Guys that you feel like have the potential to be one of the better players in their era. There's Travis Hunter at corner and Abdul Carter at edge. I think those players, you start comping them, you start talking about really, really like high tier level players, right? My comp for Abdul Carter is like Von Miller, Micah Parsons. My comp for, I don't really have a comp yet for Travis Hunter, but I've seen many scouts that I respect say that that's one of the best corner prospects, if not the best corner prospect they've seen in a long time. So there are some real blue chip talents to take a chance on to see if they could become that in this draft. And when that's the case, I think reaching for a quarterback is a bad idea. Now, why do I think that Abdul Carter is a blue chip talent? And what do I have to say about some of the concerns that folks bring up about Abdul Carter? Well, let's talk about that today. And we're going to start with the concerns that folks have. And the number one thing you'll hear when people try to dissuade you from wanting Abdul Carter is they'll bring up his size. Now, I think this is probably the most overblown thing about this prospect. People bring up Abdul Carter's size like he's tiny. He's not tiny. He's not even undersized. Like I keep hearing people call him an undersized edge. He's quite literally not a undersized edge, right? He's going to come in at 6'2", maybe, right? I know he's listed at 6'3". Maybe he comes in at 6'2". Maybe he comes in at 6'3", right? But he's going to be in that 6'2", 6'3" range, and he's going to come in over 250 pounds. Nothing about that to me screams undersized. There are plenty of edges who have played their whole career in 3-4s, 4-3s, and hybrids at 6'3", 250 pounds, right? Undersized edge would be like somebody who's below 6 foot or somebody who doesn't have a great wingspan, right? Maybe they have a shorter than 32-inch arms or something like that. Maybe they're sitting at 235, right? 235 would be undersized. Like you could still be 240 and be at perfect, at a good size for an NFL edge rusher. So this idea that he's this like 2 down, undersized player, that's just not true. He is the normal size of a edge rusher. I know people get used to looking at Myles Garrett at like 6'6", 300 pounds and think that that's what every single edge should look like. But most of the edges in the NFL are like 6'3", 250, maybe they get to 270 by the third year of their career. And I understand that usually people say, you know, if you're not 6'6", or 270 pounds, you're technically an undersized edge. But I feel like those rules are arbitrary for the position, and that guideline hasn't really been updated for how the position is played nowadays. Like the edge rush position is a much more broad position than it used to be. and it's used in a lot different ways than it used to be. So defining it as this one body type that's not undersized, I just don't think makes a ton of sense, especially when Abdul Carter's size has never been an issue for him throughout his playing career, especially since he's put his hand in the dirt, at least on a consistent basis. Again, if we were talking about short arms, I would be more concerned. If he were sub 6 foot, I would be more concerned. But writing him off just because he's not 6'5" instead of 6'3" makes little sense to me. It's not really a big deal. I think one of the reasons, and like, stay with me on this, but one of the reasons I think people think that Abdul is like so much smaller than he actually is because Abdul, and look, I know this because I am a brother with a big head. Abdul got a giant dome, bro, and he wears the biggest helmets, like the most bulky helmets you can find. Like Abdul Carter seems to wear those helmets. He went from not the Zenith, but he wearing the Pat Mahomes joint, right? That was what he wore his first 2 years in college football. Those helmets are notorious for their bulk because they have all that air cushioning inside there. And then he switched to that Riddell helmet that also makes you look like a bobblehead no matter how big your head is. And Abdul's got a giant head. And I think because his head is so big, right? Vivo Lottie, he got more head than he got body. People just like think that he is skinnier because the head makes you feel like he should be bigger. He probably will grow into that head. Look, again, I am somebody who has been in the large head committee, right? I am a full-blown member. Shout out to my brother. Shout out to my sister. We are all 3 members of the big head committee. And look, all 3 of us, we grow into our heads. So if you're worried about Abdul being undersized, one, I think he gonna gain weight in the NFL easily be able to gain weight. So if he's coming in at 250, he ain't gonna be 250 for too long. By the time he gets to his 3rd year, he probably gonna be 270. And imagine not drafting a blue chip player because he needed to gain 20 pounds. I mean, there's a lot of dumb reasons not to draft a player, but not drafting a player because you think he needs to gain a little weight. I mean, that's what the NFL is here for. That's what strength and conditioning is here for. That's the easiest. There are so many hard things to correct when it comes to different positions that people are overlooking to make an excuse to draft a quarterback, right? Jalen Milroe can't throw the ball, and people still talking about him being a late 1st round pick. Cam Ward has had bad games against good competition. He does not play in structure. People will make excuses for that, right? Shedeur Sanders hasn't played a good game versus a team worth anything. People still want to make excuses for that going number 2 overall. But then with Abdul, we out here talking about weight. Like, that's not the most correctable thing as a player gets older. Like, you're just going to naturally gain weight once you get older anyways. And Abdul, if he's coming in at 250, I know they got him listed at like 260 on Penn State's website. So let's assume that weight's like 5-10 pounds off. If he's at 250, you're fine. He can play in the NFL. All he's got to do is gain 20 pounds over the next 3 years, and then he's 270, 275. What are we really thinking about here? So this idea that Abdul Carter is undersized is just not true. No, he's not the biggest edge. He's not imposing like Myles Garrett or TJ Watt or Trey Hendrickson or some of these other guys we're used to when they're towering at 6'6" and they're 270 pounds and all of that. But you don't have to be 6'6". Like, most edges aren't 6'6" in the NFL to be successful. Plenty of edges are successful at his size and weight. It is the average size for an edge rusher. He's not undersized. He's just regular sized for a edge. And another thing to talk about here, because we had our fun talking about the head size thing, but here's the thing that drives me crazy about football and how people talk about like who needs to gain weight, who doesn't. A lot of it is based off of what you see in somebody's upper body. But if you really think about what is important in football and how muscle groups are actually used and applied by the body, the upper body, I mean, it's it's not as important for specific positions as people make it out to be, right? What is important in almost every position is lower body strength, right? Because a lot of football and a lot of just doing stuff as a human is about how you can drive through your base, because that's where all the power is, right? Your hips, your thighs, your legs, those are the biggest muscles in your body. And as long as you're able to get those muscles strong, you can compensate for not having the strongest biceps or triceps or shoulders or anything like that, right? That is not what's going to determine things. The strong legs are what matter, right? And Abdul Carter, he has strong legs. I mean, this is somebody who, it's been confirmed, has a squat rack in their living room. This is somebody who last year was benching as a junior going into his, well, no. As a sophomore going into his junior year last February, he was benching 470. Confirmed, benching 470. Who knows how much he's gotten to after 1 year of weight training? I would assume he's at least past 500, probably inching towards the 600-pound range. I have no concerns about size with him because he is strong. He converts speed to power very well. When you watch him go up against bigger players, it's not something that bothers him for 4 quarters. He was able to work past Donovan Jackson, convert speed to power on Donovan Jackson. Same thing with Ariante Ezery. Any other 300-pounder that he played in college football, it wasn't really a problem for him. Some people are concerned about him in the run game, and I think he has the most area to improve in the run game, but he's not a bad run defender, and I think he has a lot of potential in the run game because he's a very patient and cerebral player at the edge position. Like, this is one of my favorite things about Abdul Carter, is as athletic as he is and as talented and as fast as he is not somebody who's just going to close their eyes and run towards where they think the ball is going to be. He is a heads up football player, right? Like, he keeps his eyes up. He's really good at reading and reacting to stuff. Like, that's why Penn State used him so often in like a QB spy mode, where he would stand there in the middle of the rush, kind of flat-footed out the mug position, because he's really good at reading, reacting. And I think the thing that he does at an elite level, outside of his like bend and his ability, his quickness and his athleticism, what he does at an elite level is his understanding of angles. I think this is key for Abdul Carter. You saw this when he was playing a stand-up linebacker at Penn State, and then once he put his hand in the dirt, this is why I think he was able to excel super quickly. Another thing to note, man, everything that we know about Abdul Carter as a hand-in-the-ground edge rusher, we have to remember he's only been doing this for 1 year, and he's already where he is right now. So you're getting somebody who's going to be on the uptick as far as their skill goes at the edge rusher position. You're getting somebody who's young. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. And then I think what makes him an elite prospect, not just because he has the dip, he can run under the table, he has these ghost moves he can go to, the quickness, all that stuff's cool. What I think makes him an elite prospect is his understanding of angles and how well he knows how to manipulate those angles, right? Like, you see this a lot when he was a stand-up backer, how he knows how to attack certain shoulders at certain angles of offensive guards. Like, again, even if he was undersized, these abilities, right? The bend, the speed to power, the quickness and athleticism would make me not be concerned about him being undersized. But given the fact that he is 6'3" and 250 pounds, what are we even talking about? And he could do this. He could understand these angles. He's a really, really good prospect. As good as a prospect as a edge gets, right? Like, he's a top tier guy, in my opinion. All the concerns that people have of him, I think, are greatly overblown. And again, think about the level of scrutiny that, like, when I talk about the quarterbacks in this class, people tell me I'm being too hard on the quarterbacks in this class. right? Because I'm not just saying the Browns should just draft the quarterback to draft the quarterback. I'm being too hard on these guys because I'm pointing out that they have significant flaws that I think are going to be a problem in the NFL and cause concern about drafting them super high. But then Abdul Carter comes up, and the best thing y'all could throw at me is say that he's undersized. And he ain't even undersized. Like, he's just regular sized at edge, but everything else about his tape is not regular. He reminds me a lot of Von Miller. I think that's going to be his upside. His absolute ceiling is being one of the greatest edge rushers of all time in Von Miller. I think Micah Parsons is a good landing spot for him. Micah Parsons, one of the better defensive players in all of football. And then we start talking about fit with Abdul Carter, because people also throw that. Okay, well, he's not undersized, but people throw fit. Now, I've seen the 3-4, 4-3 arguments get dusted up. I've already said my piece about that, how that's not really a thing anymore, the 3-4, 4-3 argument anymore. These guys are classified almost universally as edges because teams use edges in the same way, right? Are you going to be wide 9? Are you going to be at 4-eye? Are you going to be at 4 wide? Like, there are alignments for edges to be, and edges are always going to be in those alignments these days. And now with edges moving around a little bit more often within the interior of the offensive line, it just doesn't matter if you run a 3-4, 4-3 like it used to, right? Like back in the day when like this was happening, the Jabal Sheard is a good example for older Browns fans or Browns fans who were born after like 95 or before 95. Y'all would know about Jabal Sheard, and he was like the victim of the 3-4, 4-3 changes. But that was in an era where like we weren't moving around dudes like Jabal Sheard, and we were keeping them at 4-eye. And maybe if you were like in a Jim Schwartz defense, you might play 9 wide, but wide 9, my bad. But other than that, you guys were pretty stagnant. But now you can move an edge rusher into the mug position, linebacker. You can move them off the ball. You can move them super wide. You can put 2 edges right next to each other. You just use these guys so differently and so interchangeably now that 3-4 versus 4-3 just doesn't matter as much as it used to. All of that being said, is he a fit in Jim Schwartz's system? I think if Jim Schwartz is worth his salt as a coach, he can make it work. But I do think that Abdul Carter works in this system, right? Because what you want to do in Jim Schwartz's system is get a lot of pressure up the middle to force these quarterbacks outside the pocket left to right, right? And then once you force them outside the pocket left to right, you want some elite talent, athletes at the edge positions, because you want to be able to clean up whatever flies out the middle once that pressure happens. Now, the Browns have addressed interior pressure in last year's draft by going out and getting Michael Hall, a pick that looks like it's on its way to working out. So they have that part of it, right? They also have Dalvin Tomlinson if they want to stick with that. Shelby Harris has done a good job getting pressure. The Browns have that interior pressure thing kind of figured out, and this is a year to get a guy who can get interior pressure, right? You get a guy in the 4th round, gets you interior pressure if you want to add another name, and I would advise it, right? So the Browns going to be able to have interior pressure. And then you have Miles and Abdul on either side, right? And both of these guys, Myles Garrett, incredible athlete off the edge, Abdul Carter, incredible athlete. It's going to be really hard to escape when those are the athletes that you have to escape at either edge positions. And think about this. Abdul, since he's smaller, probably will be a faster athlete than Myles Garrett. So if you're a quarterback trying to escape, you might choose to roll towards Myles a little bit more often instead of rolling towards what was Zadarius Smith, right? Abdul being there, one, just kind of condenses and forces coaches and players to stay in that pocket, quarterbacks to stay in that pocket. I also think that it gives you 2 queens on the chessboard. So there's 2 guys that you constantly have to figure out where they're going to be, how they're going to align, and how that changes your protection plan, right, as a offensive lineman. Because Myles, you're always going to slide things towards Myles. Once you make that call, you can move Abdul to the other side and kind of take advantage of where it's going to crease. And since Abdul is such a cerebral player and he has that experience playing off-ball linebacker, he's going to be a little bit more patient, see how the protection lines up, And then he's going to use that elite understanding of angles that he has to be able to take advantage of how these teams are going to crease the offensive line to be able to account for Myles Garrett. I think he is a uniquely good fit next to Myles because he has a versatile enough skill set and he's good at the right things that you need to be good at to exploit the things that teams use to stop Myles. So having Abdul, and if Abdul pans out and is the player that I think he can be coming out of Penn State, it gives you an antidote to all the chicanery that teams throw at Myles Garrett, the double teams, the triple teams, the chips, all of that, right? Like it gives an antidote to that and it slows down the solution process of that so that those are less effective. So you get a more effective Myles Garrett, and then you're going to get an effective Abdul Carter on top of that. And then teams are going to have to do whatever they have to do to worry about those two edges. And then boom, we just talked about it. Interior defensive linemen, right? This class full of them, but the Browns already got Mike Hall. You know, they have Shelby Harris, who's getting pressure. They could keep Dalvin Tomlinson. They could draft somebody in the second, third, fourth, or fifth round that will probably be a decent pass rusher. Javon Briggs showed some promise last year. Alex Wright can play in the interior and get some pass rush. Same thing can be said for Isaiah McGuire. This is a move that supercharges the part of the defense that the Cleveland Browns use the most to get the most out the defense, which is the defensive line. And this would make them such a natural disaster to be able to protect against if they make this move. I think that's why it makes a ton of sense for Cleveland. You can make these similar arguments for Travis Hunter, who I think is the only other player I think you could really debate whether the Browns should go this guy or that guy at 2. If we're just talking about best player available, it's Travis or it's Abdul, in my opinion. Other great players in this draft class, you know, I like Mason Graham, I like Ashton Genty, but if we're talking about the 2 best prospects in this class, I think it's clear, Travis, Abdul. Those are the 2. Those are the guys who, if this was best player available, 1 and 2 overall. My thing with Travis is I just think a great corner is less utilized in Jim Schwartz's system than a great edge rusher. I think they're both going to be great players. I would be excited to get any of these guys. But if you give me my choice is Abdul. And for these reasons, my choice is Abdul Carter. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you've been sold on Abdul Carter, are you not familiar with Abdul Carter's game? And maybe this video made you want to look up some Abdul Carter stuff to see how you feel about him. You know, did I bring up anything that might have changed your mind one way or the other? Let me know in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.